morning. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Today is Tuesday, January 21st, 2014. It's 9 a.m. We're at the Palm Coast Community Center for the regularly scheduled meeting of the Palm Coast City Council. Would you please rise and join me in a Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Roll call, please.
Mayor Netz.
Here.
Vice Mayor DiLorenzo.
Here.
Councilmember Ferguson.
Here.
Councilmember Lewis.
Here.
Councilmember McGuire.
Here.
Mayor, all members are present.
Thank you. Before we start our regular order of business, Councilman Lewis has a brief announcement he'd like to make.
Yes, one of our permanent attendees is in the process of undergoing surgery this morning, Jack, and I just wanted to bring it to your attention that we should say a prayer for him so that he has success in his endeavor. So I just wanted to say we look forward to seeing him here afterwards.
And in good health. Yep.
And in good health.
Thank you very much. All right, first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of the December 17th City Council meeting, the January 14th City Council workshop. Are there any additions, corrections, or is there a motion for approval?
Move approval.
Second.
Moved and second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries without objection. Agenda item number 2, presentation on the 2013 Starlight Tornado.
Mayor, City Council, this is going to be a team approach. I think Cindy's kind of driving the bus, but she has a lot of riders to go with her. This is really for 3 purposes. First, we have a legal requirement that when we have an event that the mayor declares an emergency, we're required to brief City Council on the results of that event. So we are here to satisfy that requirement. Secondly is a lot of people involved, a lot of what I consider to be exemplary performances. So we like to tell our story and let the community know what the story is as to how we respond to these kind of events. And then lastly, and probably most importantly, to let the community know that we do have the resources, both from being prepared, personnel, partners, etc., and also the financial resources to respond to an event like this and make sure that the community feels confident that when these do happen, because sadly to say they do happen, that we are ready to respond. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Cindy and she'll take it from here.
Cindy.
Hands it over to Chief.
Cindy, you've changed.
That was a quick time. Okay.
No comments. I'm not going to go there. Good morning, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Yeah, I'm going to start off, and yes, I'm not Cindy. On behalf of the first responders, we've given you a briefing prior to today, so I'll make our presentation short and sweet. I would like to call your attention to the bottom of the first slide is the bar that says December 2013 with what looks like tornadoes. In the fire service, you know how we get into glitz and glamour and pins and buttons and things. We did this in 2004 during the hurricane season, correct, in 2004. We currently have those bars being made up for all participants that helped out. Uniform personnel will get a uniform bar for their dress uniforms, but for the 240 and growing number of people that actually work the event, and that's from uniform personnel, city personnel, and volunteers that we know of. We'll be making presentations over the next month or so to present everybody with the bar to recognize their contribution to the event. So as Mr. Landon said, this is a team approach, and as that night unfolded, we in the city, it became a team approach with us. Flagler County Emergency Management arrived quickly on scene shortly after I did. We reached out to FP&L shortly thereafter, and we had the grid turned off. So a lot of players. Flagler County Sheriff's Office was right there in the middle of it, and one group of people we keep sort of overlooking, we include them in the Flagler Sheriff's Office, is the dispatch center. Their dispatch center lit up like a Christmas tree. They were answering calls left and right right after that first call came in, as well as handling all the radio traffic that we were throwing at them. All of Palm Coast units were out, all the deputy sheriffs were out. So you can imagine what that room was like for those dispatchers. As I said, FP&L Waste Pro was a big player in our organization. Flagler Volunteer Services did an outstanding job for us. We brought in the property appraisers, and I'm going through the list as other people that are going to speak before me will kind of get in a little bit more depth as to what each of these players did. The American Red Cross was on scene that night with us. A couple days after we started, State of Florida Division of Emergency Management, they were there that night, but they helped through the entire event. The workman's comp people, DPBR, and that's through the community development. I think they'll get into that a little bit. Small Business Administration. So it wasn't just a handful of people that actually started this. As we went through the days with it, it just unfolded, and these are the players. So what happened that night was we all received via cell phone while the parade was going on, as you all can remember, that we were in a storm alert, and the decision had been made through the National Weather Service, Jacksonville's warning that we were going to cancel the parade. Code Red was issued via National Weather Service. Good time to put a plug in for Code Red. If you don't have Code Red, you really need to get that put onto your phone and make sure it's updated. They've changed some of their apps and their weather notifications. So we encourage everybody to go to the Code Red site. It's real easy on the city web page, and you can register for that. The 911 center, as I said, started receiving phone calls, which in turn dispatched fire and police. We were on scene within 7 minutes, I believe, was our time frame to get on scene. And again, we received one call on Brittany Lane that they thought there was a tornado in the area. So the focus at that time was the Bridgehaven, Brittany Lane area until we actually started getting calls running up the Bayside area, the Barrington area, the Bannerwood area. So we started getting a feel for the direction of this event. Fire department personnel, that's okay. Fire department personnel hit the street, as did sheriffs, and we were by this point, because of the debris in the street, going house to house trying to find out if we had any injuries, if we had anybody trapped. While I was just getting on scene, I had made the decision to call FP&L through the dispatch center and kill the entire grid so that our crews could work safer out in that neighborhood. That took a couple minutes. Interestingly enough, I hadn't even gotten on scene. The city manager and I were already talking. As notifications were going out, Tony Capella was already on the street, so he was heading north for the Public Works entity. And Mr. Landon, I know, called Nestor and his department, and we had that. You don't always have time to make all those calls or think about those quick things. So between myself and city manager, all department heads were notified of the incident. Again, Flagler County Emergency Management showed up. They were on scene within 40 minutes. Worked with us side by side. Interestingly enough, many sightseers and the media showed up within probably 15 minutes. The streets were just covered with bumper-to-bumper traffic trying to see what was going on. That became a challenge in the early stages as the deputies were out with our fire crews trying to make sure that there weren't any injuries, yet we needed them to start to block the streets off. So that took a little bit of time to get going, but we did get it. In our world, we start calling for resources, and at this point we weren't sure what and how many resources we were going to need, so we designated the library up the street as our staging area. Any resources that were going to come in, excuse me, were going to be staged at the library. When we made that notification, 3 FP&L trucks rolled into the area with the supervisor. I got with him, gave him what we thought we had at that point. And he started going to the infrastructure. He went down and hit the utilities, pump systems, and those kinds of things to make sure that they backtracked up and got the essential power back onto the things that we really needed run. Communications and marketing division, poor Cindy. I probably called her about every 4 or 5 minutes we talked. Sent her to the library, and we also sent the media to the library and tried to keep them out of the area. So Cindy did a great job handling the media. The county's PIO and the sheriff's office PIO, they were both with Cindy and gave her support as needed. So that at about 11 o'clock, I guess it was, those of us in the field, started meandering down to the library to kind of help her out a little bit and give them an update of what was going on. Worked very well. Good. Yeah, so the first push, and you can see the weather up on the top of the screen. That's what we were looking at. Traffic signals were out. We were trying to get the generators back up and get the main intersections running. That was going to be essential. And as you can see, it goes right into debris from the roads, which luckily wasn't our event. That fell in the hands of Public Works. And again, Tony Capella was standing there right at the beginning. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Richard Adams and let him continue with that.
Okay, as Mike said, the Public Works crews started arriving about 7:45 p.m., what we call the first push. The first push is to get all the debris out of the road, respond to inoperable traffic signals, remove the debris from the sidewalks, make sure everything is safe for heavy equipment to get in, place temporary stop signs. A lot of them were blown down, as you can see there. And we activated sewer crews to start tank trucking pump stations where the power was cut until we could get portable generators set up. By 3:30 in the morning, we were kind of wrapping things up for the first push. Retired for the rest of the night. Sunday morning, 9 a.m., we had managers on site to evaluate the damage. We can establish our plan for the next section of cleanup and establish a debris removal schedule. Monday morning, we started that activity. 7 a.m., we were out there with our heavy equipment. As you can see, we started removing some of the major trees that were on power lines and that type of thing. And by Wednesday, 7 a.m., we started clearing the canals. So throughout the week, we've replaced damaged street signs, we cut down hazardous trees, cleaned up the rights-of-way. We had about 36 employees out there, 9 inmates helping us, total of about 833 hours. These were employees that normally would be out doing things like mowing. We have a construction crew. We had some pretty critical deadlines on some projects, so we were able to keep our construction crews on those construction projects, pulled the folks out of the streets that normally do mowing. All these employees are all cross-trained, so they're able to handle the chainsaws and heavy equipment, and we're able to continue these activities while our normal activities continue, the most critical normal activities continue. As you can see, there's a whole list of all kinds of equipment that we used out there. We did have one rental wood chipper that handled very large trees. The rest are all pretty much city equipment that was redirected to this effort. The Public Works crews collected about 302 cubic yards of loose debris and 204 yards of chip up. The chip up probably was, before it was chipped, was probably twice that, so probably about 400, 500 yards of loose material before it was chipped up. And Diane's going to talk a little bit about how Waste Pro participated in this project.
Thank you, Richard. As everybody knows, Waste Pro is our solid waste contractor, but I think we have found during this event that they are a true partner. With little more than maybe 24 hours notice, without interrupting any of their regular service to the residents of the city, that first day they brought out 2 grapple trucks and a rear loader and continued to assess the situation, actually brought out on the second day a 3rd grapple truck, and they were able to pick up 30 loads. It took them 5 days, basically 196 tons of debris. And when you put it all together, what Waste Pro and the Public Works crews were able to pick up, it ended up being 348 tons, or equivalent to 697,000 pounds of material in 5 days, which I thought was really incredible. So I thank Waste Pro and our crews for what they were able to do.
Okay, we also had customer service participating. On Monday, We started hearing stories about how some of the folks were having trouble with their insurance company getting responses from their insurance companies. So we sent some customer service reps out with the American Red Cross and went door to door and to see who was having difficulty and who wasn't. We went back to the office, we got on the phone with their insurance companies. In some cases, we conference called them, the customer in along with the insurance company, and help them get the attention from their insurance company that this event actually demanded. A lot of insurance companies didn't really know how severe this was for some of the folks. So I think customer service helped out a lot to kind of move that along, just let them know from a city perspective how critical this event was. And then for the rest of the week, the call volume was up significantly, mostly for debris removal. People started cleaning up their own lawns, piling stuff out front, and they wanted to make sure it got picked up. So we took a lot of calls for that, and we're able to schedule crews out to pick it up or get Waste Pro get it on their route to pick up the debris. I think there's one last kind of important thing to note. Through this whole event, there were no utility issues, no sewer overflows, and all of those employees working in all that heavy equipment, debris, chainsaws, no one was injured. So I think that that speaks volumes about our preparedness. And I think the next section is Nestor Abreu from Community Development is going to talk about the building and code.
Before Nestor gets started, I'd like to add that our public works crew are actually on private property helping many times, but particularly with trees, something that we don't normally do, but that's one of the things we're able to do when the emergency's been declared, and only when an emergency's been declared. But sometimes it's showed a lot of the residents showed a lot of appreciation that we actually helped out with some of their direct needs. But the neighbors also did a great job of cleaning up too. So it was good work together.
With this event, as with any major event, it's very important to document, to assess how much damage and how many properties and to what extent financially, what was the financial impact to the community. To that effort, the evening of the tornado, within that first hour, the key personnel, the building official, permitting supervisor that would lead the team that would do the damage assessment the following morning was at the site getting reports, seeing for themselves. Afterwards, they went back to the office, where by midnight they had contacted all the personnel that would be necessary to come in at first light the following morning and start the assessment. That assessment was fairly completed by 2 p.m. It's very important, I'll stress, that information gets out. It's important for the city. It's important for the citizens to know. It's also very important to set in motion for those agencies that would provide support and resources to us. Those numbers are very important towards that process. As I said, by 2 p.m. on Sunday, we had assessed that 209 homes were affected, were damaged to the tune of just under $5 million. 25 homes were partially incapacitated, just under $2 million. And 9 homes were totally destroyed at a worth of just under $600,000 for a total of 241 properties and $7.2 million worth of damage. Within the next few days, a few other properties we added to the list of properties that we were not able to observe on that initial day, but pretty much by 2 p.m. we had the full report to provide. Almost in the way of an update, we've issued just under 100 permits since the event for repair of such things such as roofs, screen enclosures, equipment, air conditioning equipment that the tornado transported elsewhere, windows, garages, fences. Another key component of our efforts was as with any disaster, there's people that would take advantage of the community, would take advantage of the citizens, people who have no business after the event. And what we did is we immediately contacted the resources at the State Department of Business and Professional Regulation, the investigators and administrative staff from Workers' Comp to come and work with our staff, our building, our code staff, to go out into the community to provide education, to provide information to our citizens so that they could protect themselves from people who would take advantage of them. I'm talking about those that would offer service where they have no business to provide service, and in many cases have no intention of providing those services. Would we?
Lester,
Yes, sir.
the Division of Workers' Compensation, what is their role?
Folks, they're there to make sure that the folks that are providing services are legitimate. One way to verify legitimacy is if they're paying their employees workers' compensation, if they're protecting. That's a tell. When a company is not providing workers' compensation, it's a good tell that they're not a legitimate provider of services.
Okay.
At this point, I'm going to introduce Jennifer with Flagler County Emergency Services.
Yes, good morning. My name is Jennifer Stagg. I'm representing Flagler County Emergency Management. During this incident, our role was more of a support and recovery position, and in that role, what we were doing and are continuing to do was try to find, in the simplest of terms, kind of a means to either reimburse the city, the county, any public agencies, nonprofits, or get individual assistance for homeowners. We are currently working the numbers on that. Our financial package, as scheduled, should be ready by February. There are two thresholds that you generally have to meet in order to get public assistance. The county has a threshold based on our population of about $335,000. The state has a cap of $26 million, meaning that you have to, at a local level, meet that dollar in order to request assistance, and at the state, you have to have that in total for the state to make a declaration of emergency. The state did not get declared, obviously, because that threshold wasn't met. And at this point, we are working towards that number. Our cursory report has about $200,000 that we've calculated thus far. The SBA, the Small Business Association, was called in instances like this. They can offer assistance to homeowners. They have not given us their final report yet, but in their initial report, it appears that there are not going to be able to be assistance for the residents. And the reason that is, there's several different qualifications that you have to have in order to meet that threshold, one of them being a lack of homeowners insurance or underinsured. And with the type of residents that we have, those qualifications were not met. Any questions on this? Yes, sir.
So we are not meeting the state threshold nor the federal threshold?
No, not the state or the federal threshold, no, sir. Because the state, we would have had to have met for the state that $27 million in damage, not including what the homeowners. That doesn't include the damage that we were looking at with the homeowners. That's the cost that the city and the county put forth, be it our trucks, our public works people, our staff response.
That's our concern then, not the state nor the federal.
The 335,000 is what the level that we're trying to get at. But then again, we would have to meet that number, and the state would have to be at that $27,000 million to get federal assistance, to get FEMA assistance. Any other questions? Thank you.
With the, under the response and rebuilding section, Of course, everybody is always interested in what are the final figures as it relates to any kind of disaster or major event. And I really just wanted to take a moment to highlight our disaster reserve fund. We talk about this every year in the budget, that we have this disaster reserve fund. And really the first quote there is the actual official policy set by City Council as it relates to the disaster reserve fund. The second bullet is our measurement, that's the minimum amount that our disaster reserve fund should be at the end of each year. Those were set by City Council. They've been around for years. It's really good, excellent long-term planning. As of the beginning of fiscal year 14 on October 1st, the disaster reserve fund had about $2.2 million in the bank. I think it's important to keep in mind that during the normal course of business, we have many levels of purchasing policy, compliance, and things. For instance, if I needed to buy a pencil, it might take me, 12 levels of approval to buy it. But those are there to protect the citizens' money. In the case of the disaster reserve fund, once there's a declared disaster, our disaster policies go into place, because it really doesn't matter at that point when you have a health, welfare, and safety issue what that pencil costs. We have to get out there and we've got to do what we have to do for the citizens. So having this money available strips away some of that concern of, wait a minute, can I bring this piece of equipment here because I have budgetary constraints? These are some of the numbers that we've received with our partners at the county EOC. Putting together these numbers is actually a very tedious, long, paper-intensive process. This is just a partial list at this point, as Jennifer mentioned, and they're still moving forward. But the public works labor cost is just over $17,000. The actual equipment cost, this would be the use of the equipment, the overhead, the fuel, anything to do with the actual overhead use of our equipment, was just under $35,000. The cost of the debris that we removed, the public works removed, was over $15,000. Waste Pro, Diane talked about Waste Pro and how helpful they were. Their bill was a little over $25,000. The Sheriff's Office, the resources that they put in place for the event total just under $90,000. And of course, the emergency management staff and equipment, another few $1,000s there, as well as some debris removal, just over $186,000 and growing to date. Again, it does take quite a while to do a final accounting of these because of all the moving parts related to it. But again, I wanted to thank the Flaco County Emergency Operations Center for helping us pull all this information together.
Excuse me, Chris?
Yes.
With the debris numbers there and the Waste Pro numbers, that includes the tipping fees then, I assume?
Yeah, the Waste Pro was the bill that we got, the complete bill that we received from them, yeah.
Most likely the majority of those are tipping fees.
Probably Diane. Diane's got it in front of her there.
They didn't break it out?
No, they didn't.
It's fine.
They did not break out the actual tipping fees.
But what we know from our contract is tipping fees are the majority of the cost, not labor.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Chris, I have a question. The most surprising piece on that slide there is the Flagler County Sheriff's Office, and being roughly half of the total. I would have not imagined that to be the case. Could you elaborate on that a little?
Yeah, I was going to say, I was going to ask Jennifer to do that.
In part, the reason why that's the case, the Sheriff's Office has actually given us their total amount for the response. So that includes their equipment, their personnel, whereas these others, we're still calculating those figures. In a full-scale activation, we would have this information much more readily available. But given that we have minimum staffing at the county and that we've also had to maintain day-to-day operations, it is a tedious process, and that's why we asked for the 30 days to get it together so that we could give a good deadline on that. But that's why the Sheriff's Office number is so high.
Jennifer, what level of...
Oh, I didn't realize you're here.
Mark Carmen, Commander with the Sheriff's Office. I'm going to go off the chief. I'm a little out of order, but when our costs are so high is when the chief and deputy chief went ahead and made a decision to cancel the parade. We had 10 members on parade detail. They were deployed or transferred up to the core area of Palm Coast where everything was taking place. Them, along with the 10 officers already in Palm Coast, were all shifted to the main area, and then we pulled members outside. The chief mentioned communications. Well, we actually deployed the mobile command and had that a dispatcher just for mobile command. We also called in 2 extra dispatchers to handle the hundreds and hundreds of calls that were coming in, and like Chief said, they did a great job. So all that's factored in the money. And then on top of that, the next day, we had used our entire traffic unit that were off to come on in, along with our COP division. And we kept them out, and they were deployed 24/7 until we were advised by Chief Beadle that we can scale down. So all of that was factored in, gas, mobile command, the overtime, and we were asked to give that to the emergency management. And that's why our budget was where it's at. That explains it a little bit more.
Let me also stress, some of those numbers are include the time that individuals and the equipment was used for the event, but some of that time was regular time that they would have been somewhere else in the community providing the service. So it's not an additional cost above and beyond the day-to-day cost, but it reflects the total cost of the time spent and the equipment on this event. So it doesn't necessarily, that number doesn't necessarily hit people's budgets above what they normally would see. Some of it is, such as Waste Pro and some of the other, and the overtime and those type of things.
What level of personnel, as far as the sheriff department is concerned, were off duty at the time, and were they called in?
Once the chief made the decision, and deputy chief made the decision to cancel the parade, the 10 men, they were actually would have been off duty, and normally they would have went home. We deployed them all up, so there was 10 extra men. We also had some command staff called out. And the men working the whole entire Palm Coast, they were pulled in, and then the outside incorporated areas were asked to come up and work the outskirts of Palm Coast, so we were fully covered. And so you had almost 30 personnel at that scene that night from the sheriff's office. We kept that staffing level up for extra patrol for a couple of days until we can gradually downplay it a little bit, until we were advised by the chief that we can go ahead and stand down.
Good.
Thanks.
And when we're calculating these costs, it goes down to a national identified rate of what a person man-hour plus a chainsaw, and the chainsaw has a rate, for example. There's miles per hour that a vehicle drives, and you're reimbursed, or an amount that is identified for it is, some change. But then if the car is idling, then it goes up to some $16. So if you've got that plus an individual that's on overtime, it can start to creep up. Was there another question?
And just to follow up with that, obviously, we still have the whole community development department in terms of the initial inspections and the damage assessment team that's not included in here. The fire department's not included in here. So I think you'll see a change in those total numbers in terms of the percentage allocated among the various lines once we have all the calculations completed.
We're pretty much wrapped up with the presentation, except for a video that was put together by the video production team. But I was going to ask if there are any other questions, because anybody can come up and answer.
I just have a question for the chief. During and after the initial blast of the tornado, I'm sure there were people who were stunned, shocked, and dazed. Did the Red Cross report any sort of personnel assistance to those type of people?
The Red Cross came out that night, and our first goal was to make sure nobody needed shelter and housing. They were on the street for 2 to 3 days after, and I'm going to guess and say 1 or 2 people that we know of that went outside and got extra help, services that way. But that's kind of one of those, that's between them and the individuals. But I know they were in the streets with us for 3-4 days. still going door to door, making their presence known for anybody that might need that kind of assistance. But I don't think it was a large amount if there was.
Right. Thank you.
There's one other question. The earlier slide indicated that the county had some threshold of 335, if I'm not mistaken, for some assistance. Is it likely that that 186 number will reach the 335 based on what you know today? And secondly, if it does meet that level, what happens then?
No, we anticipate that it likely will meet that number, but the 27 million was the state's number. In other words, we had a local emergency. Whether we reached that number or not, the city of Palm Coast declared a state of emergency. For the state to declare a state of emergency, they have to have that amount of damage done within the state. And because this was an isolated incident to the city of Palm Coast, while we will meet the local level for the declaration, we will not likely meet the state level of 27 million based on our response.
Which is another way of saying that and also the Small Business Administration loans, that assessment when they came in, because almost all the property were adequately insured, bottom line is it would be highly unlikely we get any type of federal or state assistance, both for the public costs and the private costs in this event. It's going to be a local responsibility.
I will add, thank you, Mr. Land, I will add that there are mitigation dollars that even if in the event you don't get the declaration from the state, this will move us up in the priority list for mitigation projects. So when those hazard mitigation grant program dollars are released in the next year or 2 years, we will have a higher priority of being able to get our projects in and funded. So there's different ways that we can go about it. There are different financial avenues that we can track down. That's why it's important to have these numbers available and to document what you've gone through, because there's a plethora of ways that we can work to resolve this over time as well.
And an example of hazard mitigation, cleaning a drainage ditch so it flows better, right?
Correct.
Something like that.
Anything like that where you're hardening a public facility, for example, or you're you've identified that this was a problem in the past with the building or the recreation center, what have you, that you want to use it as a shelter, so they'll give you dollars to help you make it into a shelter.
Historically for us, I know the one project comes to mind is we replaced a weir with mitigation dollars. In other words, flood control or flood improvements such as the ditches and our canals is where we've received. Chris is telling me we received 2 grants in this. So, the mitigation dollars are exactly that, trying to help prevent problems in the future. And if you've demonstrated that you are prone to have storm events, then you're more likely to get those dollars, I think is what the bottom line is.
There's a 3-tier system, and you move up to the first tier, which are the ones that get the pot of money first. And there's a significant amount out there that we could avail ourselves to, given this event specifically. Any other questions?
I think Cindy will wrap it up for us.
I have a question for Chris. We had $2.2 million in our emergency reserve fund. What's the plan to reestablish that, to restore that?
Right now, the bulk of our costs, other than the ordinary labor costs we would have paid anyway, relates to overtime, the hard costs. And what our plan right now is to kind of play it by ear within the departmental budgets to see how they do for the year. Because if they're able to absorb those costs within their budgets for the current year, that would be the best case scenario. Then we don't have to really hit the disaster reserve fund. The only costs right now that are being charged to the fund are the hard direct costs, such as the Waste Pro amount we talked about earlier, which is something that was, no one has room for something like that in their budget. But that's how we're going to look at it. When we do our quarterly reviews, we're going to stay on top of how the departments are doing with their overtime, with their existing budgets, and whether they're able to absorb those costs in their existing budgets.
Are you saying that there is a contingency level in these budgets?
No.
What he is saying is Public Works has an overtime budget. Public Works, as a result of this event, will go over that budget. I can almost guarantee you that. And we will not tell Public Works they can't do what they would normally do during the year because of this event. However, if we don't have a heavy rains come during the rainy season this spring as often as we do, so we don't have to call them out as often. We don't know exactly how much that will be because a lot of our overtime is weather driven. Same thing would be true with the fire department. So we don't, every year it fluctuates, and instead of us making a guess as to what the rest of the year is going to look like, we'll evaluate that as we go along.
I would imagine this particular, even though it was a small tornado, must have put a dent in Public Works budget.
Once again, yes, particularly for things like overtime, and things like a Waste Pro charge. We're not going to charge that to Public Works because we know they don't have that $25,000 budgeted. And it's but we'll continue to evaluate quarter after quarter, and then as we put the budget together for next year, we always look at our current year's budget and adjustments we need to make. To answer the mayor's question as to what about the disaster reserve fund, that will be general tax dollars that we would transfer into there to make sure we keep that at our minimum requirements as per your policy.
Right,
So,
and that's why it's so important to try to see if we can absorb as much as we can within the existing budgets, especially in the Public Works area, which is primarily funded by property taxes.
So none of the Flagler County Sheriff Office would come out of that 2.2 million?
Correct. Everything from Flagler County Sheriff's down either comes out of the sheriff's budget or the county budget. Everything above the FCSO comes out of the Palm Coast budget in one place or another.
Okay. Thanks.
All right, we're going to watch the video now, and I just want to thank Mayor Netz for narrating the video. And
As over 7,000 holiday parade goers gathered in Palm Coast Town Center, celebrating the season, cheering their favorite floats, and waiting for Santa to appear. In a quiet neighborhood, only 5.5 miles north of the parade, and just 20 minutes after the parade was canceled due to an approaching storm, at approximately 7 p.m., Mother Nature was brewing a very different sort of event.
Flagler County 911, where's your emergency? Hello, we're fine, but a tornado just hit our house. A tornado just hit your house? Yeah. Okay, what's the address? Brittany Lane.
An F1 tornado ripped across the neighborhoods in Palm Coast B, C, and F sections, leaving a 1.5-mile trail of blistering destruction.
911, where's the emergency? I'm built here, between Pine Lakes and Bel Air, I guess it is. I don't know what's down, but my windshield is smashed through and one of my side windows is, and I don't know if there's any other cars involved or what. What hit you? I don't even know. Was it a tornado? Yeah, I think so. Okay, are you okay? I rolled up the street a little bit and I'm in a parking lot, but I'm scared. Okay, ma'am, what is your name?
So begins the story of the Starlight tornado that wreaked chaos in our city on December 14th. The storm was responsible for damages or destruction to hundreds of residences. Lucky for us, it stayed away from Town Center's holiday Starlight celebration, now sharing only its name with that event, the Palm Coast Starlight Tornado. Hello, this is Mayor John Netz, bringing you a Starlight Tornado recap. This video will share with you a little bit about this event and how we dodged a bullet with this storm. Miraculously, no fatalities and no injuries. However, 239 homes were damaged and 7 of those were destroyed. This video will also share with you a little bit about the quick response and excellent communication that immediately ensued following the very first 911 report of the tornado. The representatives of your city and county government, the professional staff, your fire department, public works, and community development departments, and all participating support positions served you well in response to this event. They worked together like a finely tuned machine. At 6:40 p.m., storm alert was received via cell phones to all emergency personnel.
Well, we've just been advised we're asking everybody to head to their vehicles. Due to the incoming weather, we've checked the radar, and we're asking everybody to start heading to their vehicles.
And the decision to end the parade was implemented. Fire department personnel safely evacuated thousands at the town center parade. At 6:56 p.m., a tornado warning was issued from the National Weather Service in Jacksonville. At 7:11 p.m., the first phone call was received at the 911 center.
Brittany, is everybody okay? Yeah, everybody's fine. Did you actually see the funnel? Yes. It took out 2 oak trees in our front yard. It took out 2 oak trees in the front yard? Yeah. But it didn't hit the house? I don't think so. We have a lot of debris in front of the house, but 2 oak trees are like snapped.
Swiftly, the city's emergency response plan and our local agencies jumped into action as crews raced from the parade to the storm site, going from house to house to assure resident safety and identify initial property damage. FPL shut down power to avoid further harm. The Sheriff's Department closed down streets for public works crews to immediately address the needs of those most affected. City teams worked throughout the weekend and into the wee hours of Monday morning, and by the dawn of a new week, the sheer impact of the damage to our community was alarming. Rapid response command posts were set up for inspections, damage assessments, and permitting both in the city offices and out in the field. They looked for unlicensed contractors attempting to solicit services and distributed lists of contractors who were properly certified. Waste Pro service increased to daily pickup, helping Public Works remove hazardous trees and take debris out of the canals. Customer service reps handled hundreds of phone call inquiries, and the efforts were truly appreciated.
What did you find when you got home?
Oh, all the emergency crew, which were wonderful outside. Fire departments and the power and light, I have to say, they were up all night long and trying to give us power and everything. This was like a war zone, as you could see. Thank God nobody was injured. We were very lucky. We didn't even plan on going out last evening, and I think it happened for the best.
It literally rained in our kitchen. The tornado knocked a hole in our roof that we discovered on Sunday. The water was all over the floors. The actions of your city team restored a normalcy that goes beyond any words that I can express. Your employees were responsive and professional, and I could tell they had a specific plan in mind as they went about their work.
The guys that cleaned it were awesome because they worked so fast last night. You heard a train sound and all of you heard everything snapping. Trees after trees, and then all of a sudden I have skylights, and I saw the skylights and the trees in it. And you just hear thunk, and I ran. That was it. I ran.
As soon as Tony Capello brought his crews to my home on Birchwood Place, all of my yard debris was pulled together and hauled away. He relieved our stress and was compassionate about our situation. He followed through exactly as he said he would.
We're on the call list from the city, and it was a code red. The city did a great job. They really did. Florida Power and Light did. Everybody did.
How did the street crews respond last night, ma'am?
Oh, they were here right away. Everyone, I mean, they were everywhere. We could hear them, and they were on this, and they protected us so well. They blocked the street, so everyone who had to leave or had to sleep with windows broken, they felt a lot safer. It was wonderful how they reacted.
As you've just heard, your city and county emergency management did a marvelous job. and I know you join with me in thanking them for the hard work they accomplished in the long hours following the storm. In the end, the efforts of so many added up to so much. To those whose homes were damaged, city staff is continuously available to expedite your permitting and inspections and to help you find a licensed contractor. To all citizens of Palm Coast, all of us genuinely care about maintaining the beauty of our neighborhoods, and we promise to work with you to rebuild your homes and replant your trees to restore the splendor of our community. We never know when the next damaging weather event will occur in our area. We only know that hurricanes, tornadoes, and major rain events do eventually happen, as evidenced by the Starlight tornado. I want to assure you that your staff in Palm Coast and the county stands ready, and we will again work together to provide the very best in emergency response and protection for all our residents. Thank you so very much. Thank you for your time, your patience, and your cooperation in the aftermath of the 2013 Starlight tornado. I think it goes without saying that all of us owe a tremendous debt of gratitude to all those people, volunteers and professional staff, city, county, state, just did a wonderful job. As I said in the video, you never know when the next one's going to strike, but I think it's encouraging and satisfying to know that we're prepared. To all of them, thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor, is that video available?
Ask Cindy.
Cindy, is that the video available?
Yes, of course, we'll be utilizing the video on TV 199. We'll have it on YouTube. The link can be made available to anybody. We can make a DVD, whatever you need, sir.
Excellent.
Any other council questions, comments?
No, sir.
Thank you very much. Agenda item number 3, presentation by the Center for Business Excellence. Robin King will be presenting.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, Councilmen. I thank Jim and Bo for getting me on the agenda. I've been wanting to just get in front of all the city commissions and councils through Volusia and Flagler County to introduce myself. My name is Robin King. I'm the new president and CEO of the Center for Business Excellence. There is a folder in front of you that has, I believe, looks like this. It has my business card in it, so you have my direct phone number, my cell number. It also has some collateral material. I wanted to remind you of the services that we offer. Following the presentation that you just had, one of the things that we do provide services in is when the state does declare an emergency and they go after the federal, we are the recipient of the National Emergency Grant when that's available. And the National Emergency Grant is when we pay for individuals to help with cleanup, which we have done up in this county. We did it with the fires in '98. We did it with after hurricanes in 2004. And actually, it's funny, in Volusia County, there was a tornado Christmas, and I'm thinking it was 2007, which again didn't qualify for any assistance. There were tornadoes that happened the following February. When they put them together, then it did qualify. So all the hard work that your team has done here in collecting all that information will be useful if that happens again. Primarily what we do is provide services to those individuals who are seeking employment and for businesses who are seeking talent. The collateral material that's in your folders, anytime you want collateral material here at your offices or at the city center, we can have this available so that individuals who are seeking employment, we have a one-stop employment center. It's at the Chamber building. For the businesses, for every business that you're looking to retain and help expand in your city, we can pay up to half of the wage of a new hire for a month to 2 months. If they want to upgrade the skills of their existing workforce, we help pay for the training for that. So we want to be your partner when you're doing your economic development. The primary reason I wanted to talk with you this morning was to let you know of our upcoming rebranding. I found out on Friday that February 10th we will start doing business as Career Source Flagler Volusia. There are 24 regional boards in the state of Florida, and we all contract with Workforce Florida in Tallahassee. We've all had a different name. We're the Center for Business Excellence. You cross the bridge and you go into Seminole County, it's Workforce Central Florida. You go up into Jacksonville, it's WorkSource. It's very difficult for job seekers and businesses to find us. And so, under direction with legislation, we all now will be CareerSource with a geographic locator. Workforce Florida will become CareerSource Florida. The rest of us will have the same logo. We will have the same name, look, feel. It's going to be kind of like Publix. You see Publix and you have an expectation of quality of service, quality of product, customer service, all of that. Although within each Publix that you ever go into, the product's a little bit different depending on what their neighborhood needs. We're the same way. We have a board of directors, 31 board members who tell us what the community needs, and that's what we provide. So again, it was a short presentation. I just want to introduce myself and let you know the rebranding that's coming up in a couple of weeks.
Thank you very much. Questions?
Yes, sir.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, thanks.
How does this name change impact on or affect your modus operandi?
Excuse me?
How does this change what you've been doing in the past?
The rebranding?
Yeah.
I'm really hoping that it will keep us from being the best kept secret in the area. We have a difficult time getting businesses to know who we are, what we do, and what we provide at no cost to them, that there's no catch. To have the whole state have the same name, and now we have the state backing when it comes to outreach, I think will help us stay in the forefront of businesses' minds when they really do need assistance, when they're going to be hiring, and when they want to develop their workforce. Other than that, there's no change as to how we will do business locally.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Other council questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Keep working hard on our behalf. With council concurrence, I'd like to add an agenda item 3A. Rebecca DiLorenzo has an introduction she'd like to make. You don't dare disagree.
No.
Good morning, City Council. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for adding us to the agenda. Rebecca DiLorenzo, President of the Flagler County Chamber of Commerce, and will also be brief. Just wanted to take a moment and introduce our new Vice President of Tourism Development, Mr. Matt Dunn. He's already scheduled meetings with Luann, Parks and Recs. We have a meeting this week with executive staff at Mr. Landon's office, but just wanted to take a moment to let him introduce himself to you guys.
It's the morning of introductions, I guess. Matt Dunn, Palm Coast and the Flagler Beaches and the Flagler County Chamber. Thanks for just a minute or two of your time to introduce myself. We look forward to continuing the strategic plan that Georgia Turner and also the Tourist Development Council set in place, and I think that you'll see we're going to have many additions to that plan that will complement it as well. Tourism touches every facet of a community, and I think you'll see a lot of benefit to the city of Palm Coast with our additional activities coming soon. Look forward to announcing some exciting new success in the office and working with your city administration and Parks and Rec department and all of your various departments. So you'll be seeing a lot of me soon, and thanks again. Appreciate it. Have a great week.
Thank you very much. Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments from council? Agenda item number 4, presentation on the 2014 Christmas tree recycling event. Who's our presenter?
Carol Bennett is.
Carol.
Oh, I got it wrong. She recently changed her name. Carol Minnie.
Yes, I did. Carol Minnie, Urban Forester for the City of Palm Coast. So good morning, Mayor and Council. I am pleased to be here today to give you the numbers of the 2014 Christmas tree recycling. It's been a very popular event, and I just want to kind of give you 2 new aspects to the program that we actually had great success over and we would like to continue. And that was holiday preparations, getting ready for the Christmas tree decoration. And we had the Girl Scouts, who I thought was just amazing how these girls got together and started making ornaments for the very large tree that we were going to install at Central Park. So you see they used a lot of natural materials, pine cones, they used shells and leaves, and I thought they're pretty clever too by using toilet paper rolls too to make ornaments. So we would like to continue doing this. The girls had a great time, and they were just thrilled to have their ornaments hanging on the tree. And they were also thrilled because they got to meet the mayor and have their picture taken with the mayor before the lighting of the Christmas tree. So another aspect that we would like to keep with the program is recycling our own holiday tree. So this was a native sand pine that we brought in. It was about roughly 22 feet tall with about a 15-foot radius on it. It held up really well. I was very pleased with how long it stayed green, and I think it looked great in the park. So the event was held on January 4th. We had a lot of people come out. It was just pretty much steady the whole day. So just to give you the numbers of what folks were recycling, we took in this year 284 trees compared to last year, which was 223. We took in a little over 1,000 pounds of electronics. Last year, our numbers were higher with the electronics, and that's due to the television sets. Last year, we took in the large, monstrous, huge TVs that people didn't know what to do with, but we no longer are able to do that due to the cost. And not only that, but Waste Pro actually will pick up your TV curbside. So we no longer have to offer that within the program. This year, you'll see a spike too in the gift wrap. The Girl Scouts are taking in the gift wrap. So we took in 15 pounds of the holiday gift wrap, and last year was only about 11. And also an increase in the styrofoam that the young ladies took in. So 40 cubic square feet of styrofoam compared to last year, which was 12. And the idea of what the girls are going to do with that, with the gift wrap and the styrofoam, they're going to make some art projects for Arbor Day coming up in May, which is actually May 3rd, if you want to put that down on your calendars. And also for this year's Christmas tree or holiday decorations, they're going to use some of that gift wrap and make different collages, and also use the styrofoam to carve out and make some ornaments for the holiday tree. So all in all, the event is gaining in popularity, and it's just very successful, and I think that it's something great to continue and that residents look for year to year. So any questions concerning the program?
I have a question with respect to the city's Christmas tree. Is it possible to have a permanent city tree planted somewhere in the park?
Well, we did plant one. I think it may have been 3 or 4 years ago, but due to the conditions on site, it was difficult for that tree to get established because of the water. It was just kind of sitting in water. It is definitely something that we can look into, but we need to find a better location that the tree will be able to survive and prosper, where before it was just sitting, basically dying from root rot, just suffocating. Right. So yes, that is possible. Until we can find a good spot and pick out a good species, then this may be the way we go.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Other council questions? Thank you very much, Carol.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Agenda item number 5, ordinance amending the official zoning map relating to Island Walk, formerly known as Palm Harbor Shopping Center. Mr. Reichman.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, this is an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Palm Coast, Florida, amending the official zoning map relating to Island Walk, which was formerly known as the Palm Harbor Shopping Center, containing 28.69 more or less acres, rezoning from COM2 to Master Plan Development Zoning District, or MPD, providing for severability, codification, conflicts, and an effective date.
Mr. Landon.
Mayor, City Council, the applicant has requested that this be postponed for 2 weeks, and we'd already advertised it for this meeting. So all we're asking you to do today is to formally make a motion and adopt a motion setting a time certain for the public hearing for this proposal. And the time certain would be February 4th, 2014 at 6:30 p.m. in this room. And then at that time, you'd see the full presentation.
Is there a motion to table?
Motion to table.
Second.
Second.
Let's let the record reflect that's going to be to a time certain, as indicated by the city manager.
Yes, the time certain.
Your Honor, I have a question. We had a full presentation to the public at the Planning Development Board just a week or a week and a half ago. Why are we tabling this? We've already, I mean, I was there and I'm disclosing that as ex parte, so.
It's at the request of the applicant. We're ready, the staff was ready to go. This is a development agreement, it's a legal document, and their only response when I asked was they wanted to make sure that they had all the details, the I's dotted and the T's crossed before they came and finalized it with City Council approval. So, you know,
Are they going to make this presentation when they cross all the T's and dot all the I's? Are they going to make it to the planning board again?
No, it shouldn't be anything significantly different than what the planning board heard. But they wanted their legal documents and their legal staff to finalize all those documents, which are not necessary for planning board, but are something that are necessary for city council.
Well, that's an interesting question, though. If the planning board approve one document that came before it, the changes may be something they want to look at again.
We do not, once again, do not anticipate any changes from what you're talking about. We're talking about their internal, whatever they are doing as a corporation. This isn't anything that affects the application per se, as I understand it at this time. So
when they do come before us, the presentation they give us will be the same presentation that they gave the planning board.
As far as we know at this point, yes.
And Your Honor, again, by virtue of making sure the record is complete, I am declaring an ex parte communication. I was at that planning board meeting, and I don't believe it's going to influence. I want to hear the presentation here before I cast a vote.
Thank you. I will, when this comes before us again, I will again ask for ex parte communications. We have a motion and I believe a second to table. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item number 6, an ordinance amending Chapter 2 of the City Council to add a new section entitled Election Procedures. Mr. Reichman.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, this is an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Palm Coast, Florida, amending Chapter 2, Article 2, City Council, to add a new section entitled Election Procedures of the City of Palm Coast Code of Ordinances, providing for severability, codification, conflicts, and an effective date.
Mr. Landon.
Our favorite attorney will be handling this item.
Mr. Mayor, Council, this agenda item, as well as your next agenda item, the very next ordinance, are proposed to you consistent with the presentation that the staff and I made at your workshop last week. And these are ordinances, you can call them cleanup ordinances, whatever you want to call them, but they are consistent with Chapter 166, the Florida statutes dealing with municipalities. They are consistent with the Florida Election Code, which is in the Florida statutes. They are pursuant to recommendations and consistent with the direction of the Department of State and specifically the Division of Elections. They are consistent with the Attorney General's Office recommendations and its opinions, as well as consistent with input from the county through its county attorney. These two ordinances, which include amendments to your code and to your charter, are consistent with the election results from the referendum in 2011, in which more than 80% of the voters chose to amend the charter to make sure that there was a greater voter turnout and that costs were reduced in city elections, moving those city elections from odd years to even years to correspond with state and federal elections. Additionally, these two ordinances taken together will render moot any remaining concerns that our supervisor elections may have regarding the 2011 referendum, as well as any concerns that she may have about our charter and its internal consistencies. And hopefully will allow our city clerk and your city attorney, as well as city staff, to work with the supervisor, with or without interlocal, to conduct the city's 2014 elections. These ordinances will clarify the charter regarding candidate qualifying, election canvassing, and absentee ballots. The next agenda item, as part of the next agenda item, will consolidate and reconfirm the results of that 2011 referendum where the voters approved the changes as I before described, and hopefully render any concerns that the supervisor has moot so that we can move forward and with her and her office and prepare for and conduct the 2014 city elections, along with county, state, and federal elections to be conducted later this year. And that is a general overview of the purpose of these two legislative actions, Mr. Mayor and Council, and certainly welcome any questions, any follow-up or specific questions you may have about any particular part of this ordinance or the next ordinance, as the case may be. Thank you.
We'll take them one at a time. Council, questions with agenda item number 6.
My question, Your Honor, is has the SOE indicated that the passage of these ordinances will cancel out all the fears and objections that she's had up to now?
Councilmember, last week I reached out by telephone to the supervisor of elections and asked, or intended to discuss with her that very point and to explain to her what the city was doing, consistent with what our intentions had always been with regard to the necessary clarification of the city's charter, which was required given the decision of the voters in 2011, as well as to make another amendment with regard to the canvassing of absentee ballots, an issue that she'd raised. I unfortunately did not receive any response from the supervisor, and as some of you or all of you may be aware, just to clarify the city's position and to reach out to the supervisor to be able to try to work with her in her office. I corresponded with her yesterday. Certainly have not received a response, as yesterday was a federal holiday, but I just wanted to confirm and clarify with her that the city council, if should it adopt these ordinances, will be taking those steps that are necessary, or those steps that hopefully will, if not necessary, are appropriate to address her concerns. And we hope to hear a positive response to her in the immediate future, because your city clerk and I are both prepared to meet with the supervisor and prepare for the elections, and if necessary, sit down and work through an interlocal if that's something that she feels that her office needs.
So Mr. Reichman, if I understand you, and I think I do, your office has reached out to the office of the SOE to try to sweep away any of the concerns that she had, even though we don't necessarily have to do that, and she has not chosen to discuss this with you.
Well, we've been doing that for months now. As all of you are aware, I have provided written correspondence on 2 separate occasions to the supervisor, directly responding to her stated concerns, providing her case law, providing her Attorney General opinions, providing her information from the Attorney General's office, Division of Elections, and so on. But my recent involvement was more raised out of concerns because of efforts by your city clerk, who had been trying on repeated occasions to create a time frame where she, as the clerk for the city, could meet with the supervisor to begin the normal process of their team, the two of them, their two offices working together as they have done in the past, and hopefully will do this year, to get ready for and conduct our elections. And because the city clerk's efforts to meet with the supervisor were rebuffed, I got involved and reached out, as I mentioned, last week by phone, and hearing no response, then sent the more explicit explanation of the city's position to the supervisor of elections in the email that I believe, yes, I know all of you were copied with, and hopefully upon her review and reflection of the information that is provided in there, we'll be hearing a positive response, and that is our hope.
Any other questions on agenda item number 6? Mr. Lewis.
With respect to the action that we took in regards to the first item on this topic, is it also true that the county attorney is in agreement with the action that was taken with respect to the referendum and everything?
I can only infer from my reading, as I'm sure all of you have read as well, from a correspondence and a memorandum that the county attorney prepared in December. That correspondence was to Mrs. Weeks, and the memorandum was to his bosses, the county commission, and you know, he reached the conclusion that this city, taking actions as I would submit or before you today on first reading, as well as, if necessary, in interlocal, would be more than enough to address her concerns. He indicated again, and I want to stress this, that he clarified for her purposes as well as for the county's purposes that he is not her attorney, but he would welcome the opportunity, as I would welcome the opportunity, to sit down and should she have any more remaining legal concerns, I would welcome the opportunity to sit down and address those with any attorney that she should be working with.
Thank you. Other counsel,
Mr. Reichman, other than Mr. Hadid, has not the city, through the auspices of your office, contacted legal opinions from the state of Florida, other than the Attorney General herself, as to the validity of the 2011 referendum and the ability of the city to conduct an election in 2014?
Well, let's be very specific. The objection that the supervisor has raised as to the validity of the 2011 referendum is only as to one specific charge, and that is that, and I'm being very detailed now, and that is that it was her contention that there was an issue with regard to the type of election or type of vote that was where the voters approved this request by the council at that time by more than 80%. And it's her contention that as part of some language in Chapter 166 that says that these types of referendums are to be conducted at general or special elections called for that purpose. And since this was done in conjunction with a primary election in 2011, that violated the requirements of this section in Chapter 166. Now, we've responded to her on multiple occasions that that is not consistent with Florida law. Indeed, the Attorney General has specifically opined that a special election can be conducted at the discretion of the entity, in this case the City of Palm Coast, at the discretion and the desire of the City of Palm Coast at a primary election. That is an existing opinion from the Attorney General. And we've communicated that with her. I certainly cannot imagine that there would be, if we were to submit back to the Attorney General seeking an opinion, that the Attorney General would change her mind. Furthermore, as I communicated with Mrs. Weeks yesterday, the type of issue that she's raising would not, in this situation, be the type of issue that this Attorney General would respond to. This Attorney General would likely say that it is the policy of the Attorney General's office, which is stated on her website and stated in her policies, that the Attorney General's office does not get involved in these types of disputes and does not render opinions on mixed questions of fact and law, which is really what she has raised over these last several months. Having said that, again, I would repeat, the prior opinion of the Attorney General as to the law on this issue is very clear. It's very clear, and I attached that to my email yesterday. And that is that the Attorney General's office has opined, and has not contradicted any later Attorney General opinion, that these type of elections, which were conducted by the city in 2011, may be conducted legally in a primary. This was a special election called by the City Council of the City of Palm Coast for that purpose. And there's no requirement that it have to be a standalone special election. Importantly, it was conducted at an election where all of the voters, a nonpartisan election where all of the voters were entitled to participate. So hopefully by this discussion today and by the correspondence that we've provided, that we'll be hearing back from the supervisor, hopefully this week, because as I indicated before, Ms. Smith and I are ready to meet with her to get all this behind us and for the best interest of the public and the voters and the citizens to begin preparations for the election.
Well, some of the reason I asked Mr. Reichman is some of the correspondence I get says, well, you know, if you're so sure that the city's done things right, why don't you go to the AG and ask Pam Bondi to render an opinion? And I think what you're telling us here is an opinion on matters of this nature have already been rendered.
Already rendered in that in this specific situation being different, as the Attorney General, I believe, that it would not respond. But again, it would be duplicative and superfluous because the Attorney General has already responded. And the other thing I want to point out is if let's just say for the sake of argument that there was some legitimacy to the legal concerns that Mrs. Weeks has raised as to the propriety of the 2011 elections. The 2011 referendum was done or chosen to be done by the City Council at that time, even though that City Council could just as easily amended the charter and moved the elections from odd years to even years by an ordinance. It's not required to do it by an ordinance, but it's authorized to do it by an ordinance. So that's one of the purposes of this process before you today and in 2 weeks from today, is just to eliminate any arguments regarding that and to just go ahead and as authorized by Section 100.3605 of the Florida statutes, go ahead and confirm and ratify the actions taken by the voters in 2011 by the passage of this ordinance so that we can move forward.
Other council questions? Seeing no, we'll open the meeting to the public. Any from the public wish to be heard on agenda item number 6? Seeing no one approach the podium, we'll close the public portion of the meeting, come back to council. Again, I want to iterate Mr. Reichman's observation. In 2011, City Council, in an abundance of transparency, chose to make this a referendum. They could just as easily have passed an ordinance without any voter involvement. We chose at that time to make it open to the public. So, to me, this is a non-issue. But additional questions, comments, or motion on agenda item number 6?
Move approval of agenda item number 6, an ordinance amending Chapter 2, Article 2, City Council to add a new section entitled Election Procedures in the City Code of Ordinances.
Second.
Moved and second. Roll call vote, please.
Vice Mayor DiLorenzo?
Yes.
Councilmember Ferguson?
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis?
Yes.
Councilmember McGuire?
Yes.
Mayor Ness?
Yes.
Mayor, this motion passes 5-0.
Thank you very much. Agenda item number 7, an ordinance also dealing with regular elections and primary elections. Mr. Reichman.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Council, this is an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Palm Coast, Florida, pursuant to Section 100.3605, subsection 2, Florida statutes, amending Section 5, City Council's subsections 1B, qualification for office, and Section 8, elections, subsection 3, qualifying for office, and 4, schedule for regular elections and primaries of the city charter, to ratify and readopt the electors' 2011 vote to change the schedule of city primary and general city elections to correspond with state and federal elections, and to change the qualifying dates for the city elective office, providing for severability, codification, conflicts, retroactivity, and effective date.
Mr. Landon, are you going to have Mr. Reichman make any additional comments?
I hope not. His previous comments address this ordinance, too.
Unless there's additional questions, Mr.
Are
Mayor,
there any
Council.
council questions on agenda item 7?
Just one, Your Honor, if I may. How does this ordinance differ from the referendum of 2011? Aren't they duplicitous, if you will?
They are. They're identical. The actual charter language that will be changed by this ordinance is identical to that which was proposed and approved by the voters in 2011.
By passing these two ordinances relative to the elections, are we in any way, shape, or form stating that we may not have done things right in 2011?
I am telling you, from a legal standpoint, that is not the case. I cannot speak for how other people will infer from
I'm
this.
only interested in the legal opinion.
No, sir. This is for the purposes that I've described previously.
Okay.
If I may add, at workshop, we said, you don't have to pass these ordinances, and we're still okay. This is just to clarify the record because of some of the questions we've received.
And that's exactly why I ask the questions I do, Mr. Lannon, because I want it to be a matter of public record that the city did not do anything improper in 2011, and by passing these ordinances, if they should pass, we are not admitting that there was there were erroneous measures taken at that time.
Absolutely. In fact, Mr. Reichman asked, do we even want to do these because they're not required? And then after we conferred, we both agreed that yes, it'd be best to clarify the record. So just want to keep stressing that we are not trying to change anything. We are just ratifying what has already taken place, or just having our local code consistent with the state code, and everybody, when it comes to elections, understand the state code is going to override, so it's not necessary, but it still cleans up the paperwork.
Sort of belt and suspenders.
Yes.
Mr. Ferguson.
I just like to, for the record, as Mr. McGuire is keen to point out each time, this is an example, I think, of why some people find politics to be, and government to be so inefficient, in that here is a matter that was put to the voters. Oftentimes I hear people say, put it to the voters, put it to the voters. This was put to the voters, and by an overwhelming majority, people opted to want it to have it to be this way. Now here we find ourselves 2.5 years later, challenging whether or not we did the right thing by the letter of the law or something. And it's just frustrating for me as a kind of novice politician to see this process unfold, and that it's such a waste of resources to know all the good things that could be done by government, to have to retrace your steps and validate something that was the proper thing to do, or at least chosen to be the thing to do. And to go through this process is just frustrating as a person sitting here to see it unfold like this. I'd just like to say that the sooner we get this matter cleared up and put to bed, the better it'll be for everybody, and mostly the voters who we're working for. So.
Mr. Mayor, could I add one item, just to follow up on that comment? As far as the expense to the voters and the citizens in Palm Coast, one of the reasons why your city manager and your city clerk and I decided to move forward with this process is because we're hoping that this will end it. We're hoping that this will avoid any litigation. Because if there was litigation, that will cause an additional expense to the voters. We're hoping that's not going to be the case. Furthermore, we're hoping that this will cause supervisor elections to work with our office so that we can have the savings that were contemplated by the voters in 2011, rather than the unfortunate necessity of having to conduct parallel elections later this year, with the city having to incur the unnecessary and additional expense of conducting our own election. We believe that these actions will allow us to work hand in glove with the supervisor to avoid all of those unfortunate expenses and unnecessary expenses that the citizens and taxpayers would otherwise have to incur.
Thank you, Mr. Reichman. At this time, I'd like to open the meeting to the public. Anyone from the public who should be heard on agenda item number 7.
Louis McCarthy, Palm Coast. I wish to thank Mr. Ferguson because he struck a chord that I think my good friend Jack Carroll would agree with, and that is this. You know, they put it before the public, and the public says yay at high numbers. And now this wrangling, we don't want expense, and my friend Jack would always go with the expense thing and look at that end of it and say, why are you spending money on all of that? And that's my answer too. The voters voted for it, so be it. And let's pass this thing, move on, and go on to bigger and better things for this city. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker. Seeing no one approach the podium, we'll close the public portion meeting. Back to council. Are there any additional questions, comments, or is there a motion on agenda item number 7?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and second. A roll call vote, please.
Vice Mayor DiLorenzo?
Yes.
Councilmember Ferguson?
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis?
Yes.
Councilmember McGuire?
Yes.
Mayor Netz?
Yes.
Mayor, this motion passes 5-0.
Thank you very much. Agenda item number 8, an ordinance relating to amending Chapter 29, impact fees, Article 3, park system impact fees. Mr. Reichman.
Mr. Mayor, this is an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Palm Coast, Florida, relating to amending Chapter 29 impact fees, Article 3 park system impact fees, amending sections 2973, 2974, 2975, 2976, 2980, 2981, 2984, and Exhibit A, park impact fee formula, providing for applicability, codification, conflict, severability, and an effective date.
Thank you, Mr. Landon.
Mayor, City Council, many months ago, I think we all agreed that our current impact fee, recreational impact fees were antiquated. The calculations did not make a whole lot of sense, and they needed to be brought up to date and simplified. We hired PRMG, our fee consultant, to do exactly that. It has been I think, a very healthy process. It's been fairly lengthy. City Council adopted this ordinance on first reading a couple of months ago. At that time, you asked us to look at a couple other options when it came to the resolution, which is the next item. So we went back and asked our experts to look at those options. They've included those options in their report so that you can adopt those if you would like. This, because it's been some time, we've asked, since we've talked about this proposal, we've asked our consultant Henry to come back and make the presentation again. This will cover this ordinance and the next resolution. The ordinance will change the authorization and how we calculate impact fees via this study. The resolutions will be where you have the option, and there's actually 3 separate options under the resolution as to which one you select. And this is second reading, so if you approve it today, you'll be final approval, and then as you move on to the resolution, then you'll have the 3 options you can pick from. But I'd like to turn it over to Henry and have him go through those and outline exactly what those options are and how we got to where we are today.
Mr. Mayor, Council, good morning. Henry Thomas, for the record, with Public Resources Management Group. As Mr. Landon indicated, he asked me today to, since it's been a month or so since we last workshopped this, I'm just going to briefly go through the presentation we went through last month to again, for the public and to make sure we're all together on where we're at in the process here. When we looked at the various options to develop the park impact fees, the question that was raised was regarding the DRI areas and their timing and their viability in the future. There were over $140 million worth of assets that were included in the park impact fee funding requirements, and a number of those assets were tied to requirements in the DRA areas. And the areas we looked at were Old Brick Township, Neoga Lakes, State Road 100, and Palm Coast Park, and they're shown here on the map. And the 2 options that are in addition to the base case, I'll call it, that we developed, we're looking at either removing all 4 of the projects and the populations associated with these DRIs, or alternatively only 2 of the areas, Old Brick Township and Neoga Lakes, because the other 2 DRIs are probably a little more imminent and a little closer to beginning than the first 2. The various dwelling units and costs that we removed associated with these alternatives, there was about $8 million in the State Road 100 project cost, $3.7 million for Palm Coast Park. Old Brick Township included $13.1 million, and Neoga Lakes was $17.7 million. A lot of this relates to neighborhood parks. The second line on this diagram shows you the number of associated dwelling units that have been entitled for each of the DRIs, which again look about 18,000 units in total. The other thing we did since the original analysis that we provided to you was we looked at a slight change in our methodology to change from a population-based calculation to a dwelling unit-based population. And in the original study, we had looked at the current, or the population build-out forecast for the city, and we looked at the current census with respect to persons per household. Now, that number does change over time, and what we decided on, that it would be more accurate to look at the specific number of dwelling units that are entitled currently in the development process. And rather than try to calculate dwelling units based on a 203,000 build-out population and a persons per household figure that is a current figure, we went back to the comp plan itself and to the development documents and looked at the dwelling units that were actually entitled. So it's a slight change, and if under the population-based methodology, the original fee that we proposed for you was $1,133 per unit, you're currently charging $1,264 a unit, so that's roughly a $131 decrease in the fee. The alternative one, just to show you the impact of that, removing all 4 DRIs, the projects and the related population, would reduce that fee to $888.82. Under the dwelling unit methodology, which we would recommend is, again, a little more precise, the proposed revised fee is $1,013. The two alternatives, alternative one, removing all 4 DRIs, would be at $784.52. And alternative two, only removing the Neoga Lakes and the Old Brick Township DRIs, would leave the fee at $849.24. This one's a bit of a hypothetical analysis. What it shows is that if indeed the DRIs do move forward and get added back into the mix, where those projects are then considered for funding within the impact fee budget, if you will, the capital needs, and the population is there to help pay for those. And you can see this is really just a minor timing difference, but by adding them back, you can see that we come roughly back to the original fees. 1013 and alternative 1 and 2 would be $984 if they got added back, and then that's if they're added back after 5 years. If they're added back after 10 years, the fees would drop slightly to $953.70. And the difference between the 1013 and these other figures has to do with the change in existing versus future population that will occur over time. And indeed, in making these calculations, I had to assume something about population growth, and we did a very modest population growth of 1% a year to do these calculations. And again, it's just to give you an example that when you do add the DRIs back in, the fees do come back to roughly the level that we're proposing today. Oops, sorry. Let's just move on here. Got it. All right. There is a revenue effect of the alternative fees, and one is the difference in the fee calculation itself. And the other is the fact that you don't have the population in the next 5 years that joins the city. The number of new units would be paying the lower fee. Again, I used the 5 and 10 year scenario, and assuming that all the DRIs are online in 5 years, there's a slight loss in through 2018 in the revenues that would be collected and available through impact fees. Obviously, having a lower fee, you would have lost less revenue. And through build-out, Alternative 1 is about 1.9 million. Alternative 2 is about 1.8 million. That's with the DRIs coming back online and or being online in 5 years. If you assume that it's going to be as many as 10 years, then again, the fees are lower. Again, we under the Alternative 2, the fees are lower. And you'll see that there's, again, slightly more revenue loss here, about 3.8 million for Alternative 1 and 3.5 million. Basically, this is going to shift the funding to another source. The most obvious source is probably taxpayers in order to fund that $140 million project. But again, these amounts are not exceedingly large relative to that $140 million capital plan that we're looking at. I did it again. Okay. Our current recommendation is to implement the proposed revised impact fee of $1,113. That again is that at this point, with the revised methodology on dwelling units, it's roughly a $251 reduction per household. And then again, we do present two alternatives with lower fees in the near term only. One is Alternative 1, again, where all 4 DRIs are removed from the equation, resulting in a proposed fee of $784. And Alternative 2, $849. Of course, all of these fees are valid fees, and you should consider them. Do note, though, that the alternatives do result in lower revenue that will be recovered from the fees themselves. So, with respect to our recommendations, and consistent with our recommendation of the $1,013, we believe that the DRI should be recognized when the entitlements are granted. And the reason for that is it does broaden the base for need identification and cost recovery. So by including that population and their projects that the DRIs will be required to prepare, those parks that the DRIs will be putting in their properties, it will broaden the base for your capital plan itself. So at this point, again, you have before you, and I'll go back to the alternative fees, our recommendations.
Council questions? Mr. Lewis.
I think I understand most of what we are trying to do, but what bothers me, and I think I prefer the proposed revised fee, but what bothers me about the alternatives is the fact that we're putting off something for the future, and then we're going to tax the future residents to make up the loss that we would have lost had we not gone through the proposed revised fee. Is it proper or correct to have, at the time the DRIs are recognized or entitlement is given to them, is it correct at that time to, if we use the alternatives, is it correct that at that time to tax the then taxpayers for revenue that could have been saved according to the proposed revised fee, had we gone with the proposed revised fee?
Well, and again, I think technically the question about the fee level has to do with whether the DRIs will actually move forward in the future and when. And so if they don't occur for 30 or 40 years from now, for example, I think was one of the issues raised, then obviously those parks and expenditures won't be needed for quite some time into the future. On the other hand, if we include them in because they are entitled, the units, the dwelling units with these DRIs, as I understand it, are currently entitled, then there is a driving need for the facilities associated with the DRIs, particularly the neighborhood parks. So you're correct that there would be a loss of funding until you add it back in, whether that's 5, 6, 20 years into the future. Then when you add those fees back in, obviously the charge would go up. Now, whether it's proper to shift that funding to the taxpayer or to some other source that isn't future growth related from development, I think that's really your call, because I think all the 3 fees would be valid and legally acceptable, and Mr. Reichman could weigh in on that. But I think the question is, what is your intent on getting as much funding, or the level of funding that you're trying to receive through the growth process, through the impact fee approach? Again, the significant loss in revenues will, if you're going to go through with the plan, which is what this is all predicated on, will need to be made up. On the other hand, this council could say, we're not going to charge these impact fees at 100%. We're going to charge them at 50% of the cost of new growth. That would still be a valid fee, and it does have funding implications, but I think it's best for the council to judge whether that's appropriate or not. From my viewpoint, all 3 of them are valid fees.
And the other part of that discussion is it proper for this council to impose taxes on the obligation to impose taxes by a future council on taxpayers? I think that the proposed revised fee that you have up there will, I think, keep us out of that particular need. But I think the alternative that we have will put stress on the future councils to raise taxes, and I think that's a consideration.
Well, and again, we haven't examined those impacts, because obviously with these DRIs comes population growth, with future growth. I don't think the tax portion of the funding need is a solved issue today. But I do believe that, again, all 3 fees are valid in terms of meeting the requirements that you would have to be supportable and defensible. But the question is, how are you going to fund this $130 million in future costs that you're looking to put into recreation services?
Council questions? Mr. McGuire.
Within the past year, we've heard various predictions, prognostications on the population that's expected to grow in Flagler County to the tune of up to and including 200,000 residents. We have less than half of that now. So if these forecasts have any validity to them, as I see this, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but alternative 1 says, well, it's really not going to happen, and alternative 2 says it probably isn't going to happen. So the proposed revised fee of $1,013 assumes growth and assumes that these DRIs will be enabled sometime in the relative near future. So, I mean, am I making sense in my assumption? I believe you are. I believe that's the essence of the difference, is whether the DRIs will occur and when they might occur, and should they be put into should they put into the funding equation today? Okay. That answers my question. Thank you.
Mr.
DiLorenzo.
To what Mr. McGuire was asking, if they come on, if one of the alternates are selected, and then development occurs, then those projects will be added in to the formula, and then the fee will be readjusted. And is that true for any other project? If some project comes along that's currently not on our project list, but we say, or a future council says they'd like to they'd like to have that, they're going to add that into the list and methodology?
Absolutely. The approach we've taken to calculate the fees is an improvements-based approach. So we're looking at the capital needs to fund the various parks and recreation facilities that have been identified through the city's planning processes. And obviously there are cost estimates associated with those facilities that will over time become more real, if you will, as those projects down the road are actually built. And obviously in the future, the city may reconsider its list of needs, if you will.
And so, if I may add, just clarification, this ordinance or resolution, I'm not sure which one, requires us to come back and evaluate the impact fees every 3 years. And at that time, let's say there was a new residential development that is currently not entitled, that those new areas would be included, plus any update to your capital improvement plan. So you're required to look at this every 3 years if you adopt it as presented to you to address those unforeseen changes.
So if this is passed now, it's the snapshot for where we are today. And then in the future, if new development occurs or if DRIs start to come online, then they'll be adjusted at that time to as the development is realized.
Yeah, I think, the best you can expect of this process is that it will be adaptive. And again, you've put a lot of effort into identifying the recreational needs for the community for the long term. And that's the approach we've taken. The reason we took that approach is to, again, have the broadest base of thinking so that we are able to fund the plan using impact fees to the level that is legally acceptable. Again, keep in mind that even at this fee, there's a significant amount of these projects that are not funded by this fee because we cannot ask growth to pay for all of our funding deficiencies, only for their pro rata share of it. And the way the capital plan looks today, there's a significant amount of dollars that this won't. So we're going to have to find other funding sources for those. But obviously, again, things change. Now, you're probably not going to get a lot of traction out of an impact fee if there's some new change 40 or 50 years into the future that's right at the end of the growth cycle, because there'll be very little households to help pay for that. And you've got to apportion the costs on a per capita basis and not say, oh, these are the last remaining households, they're going to have to pay for the last remaining projects. It doesn't quite work that way. So you're right, the fee can change, the funding is going to vary over time based on your changes to the plan and to the fee structure. And there's nothing that would prevent a future council from saying, we're not going to set these fees at this level anymore. So,
if I could also add to that for a little clarification, if you adopt the resolution for alternative 1 and 2, it includes language in there that specifically says that if these DRIs do become active, then at that point we would bring it back to City Council to include them in the calculations. With that said, as the definition is right now, at least Palm Coast Park, which is one of those 4, already meets the definition of active. They've already got infrastructure. They've already done things. And so with alternative 1, and that's why that one's really problematic, is because Palm Coast Park is what we would consider active because they've moved dirt, they've put infrastructure in. And it's just a matter of time. It won't be long before they go vertical because they're working hard at that. The difference is when you go out west of the railroad tracks, Neoga Lakes and Old Brick Township, there's nothing out there but critters and trees, and so that is where you're have a whole different timing issue. So those are kind of examples as to why we gave you a couple of alternatives to look at. But the ordinance or the resolution addresses it.
Mr. Landon, you had said that we are required to revisit this every 3 years, but are we able to revisit it in less than 3 years?
Thank you for the clarification. Yes, or as, in other words, you're required to every 3 years, but City Council can revisit it anytime you would like.
Thank you.
Question? On proposed, the first proposal there, the recovery deficit that we will have using that will be much less than the alternatives. Therefore, any future council wouldn't be taxed with the idea of raising taxes that will be very excessive to meet the then needs.
Again, if you, again, making some assumptions about growth and the timing of when the DRIs would come online, there would be your deficiencies, that the revenue that you would not receive from the growth over the next 5 years and then throughout build out once the DRI is online, and then through 10 years. And the other thing to keep in mind too is that all the monies collected in this fee are for a very specific dedicated purpose, and that's capital projects for recreation only. So I think I said in an earlier meeting, it's a closed system. It's not like, the monies we collect, whether you collect it at $850 a month or $1,013, will all be used for the same purpose.
And I think I have to look at the bottom part of that screen and says that's the part that bothers me, the responsibility to city taxpayers in the future. That we can lessen that, and I think we can lessen that with respect to using the proposed revised fee as opposed to using the two alternatives. I think that would make better sense to me than to look at the alternative and see, my God, look at the deficit that we have to worry about. Comment.
Couple of comments. Mr. McGuire alluded to this. If you look at the Bieber projections, they project a population for Palm Coast to 165,000 by the year 2035. That's their best guess based on a whole variety of parameters, but it's a crystal ball projection nevertheless. The issue of excluding 2 or 4 of the DRIs is interesting because you point out that entitlement triggers inclusion into the calculation. If you exclude any or all of the DRIs, they already have their entitlements. So you're now saying that entitlement is not the trigger. Mr. Landon pointed out that Palm Coast Park has already started infrastructure installation. That could very well be the trigger when you start doing something. And of course, there is another factor. All of these numbers are based on a long-term capital project plan of about $140 million. Future councils could raise the impact fees if they felt it was necessary. Future councils could winnow down that long-term capital plan if they felt it necessary. So there are a bunch of options. I think the important thing for us to remember is that what we do today is not chisel and stone. 3 years from now or less, you can revisit this if the Bieber projections change, if we see a surge in development. So whatever we pick, it's for the short term.
And it's or as directed by City Council, which means if something significant happened and we felt that it was necessary to look at it, we can.
A little bit of summary or structure. The ordinance does not address what alternative. The ordinance allows you to change the methodology.
We're actually discussing an ordinance and a resolution.
Right. So the ordinance is
fine discussion.
Unless you have issues with any of the wording in the ordinance, it is generic to this discussion.
And it probably be worthwhile to vote on the ordinance and then take up the resolution, which is what we're discussing at this point.
Right.
Council, do you agree?
Yes.
Before we do that, let's open the meeting to the public. And if the public wish to be heard on agenda item number 8, which is the ordinance amending impact fee, recreation impact fees. Please give us your name, limit your contribution to 3 minutes.
My name's Eric Phillip. Just to be clear, is there going to be another comment on the alternative things?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'll wait.
Okay.
Sorry.
Anyone else wish to speak? Seeing no one approach the podium, we'll close public portion of the meeting, come back to council. On the agenda item number 8, additional questions, comments, or a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and second. Roll call vote, please.
Vice Mayor DiLorenzo?
Yes.
Councilmember Ferguson?
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis?
Yes.
Councilmember McGuire?
Yes.
Mayor Netz?
Yes.
Mayor, this motion passes 5-0.
Okay, this brings us to agenda item 9, which is the resolution that allows us to choose one of the 3 alternatives, the recommended fee, alternative 1, alternative 2.
Mayor, if I can, the presentation covered it.
Yep.
What you need to do is to adopt option 1, 2, or 3. They're actually labeled that way in your packet. Option 1 is the proposed recommended fee, which is up on the screen of 1013. Option 2 is alternative 1, which is the 784, and option 3 is alternative 2. So they're in that same order as you see up on the screen.
And if I could add one item just to add on to that. One of the differences between those 3 options is you'll note in option 1 does not include the language, which what I call is the trigger to put the DRIs back into the number. That's why you have that additional language in options 2 and 3, which correspond to alternative 1 and 2. That language is not in option 1, which is the proposed revised fees.
And as a consequence, if we were to adopt the proposed revised fee, and somewhere out of thin air, a 5th DRI should materialize, it would be included the minute its entitlements were established.
No, it would be included when you do your review in 3 years. This fee will stay the same no matter what.
The point is that if there were another DRI approved, that would trigger a change.
It could, yes.
Because the proposed revised fee, implicit in that, is that a DRI is included when it receives its entitlements.
Right, that's correct.
Your Honor, if I may.
Mr. McGuire.
Mr. Reichman, what's the downside of not having a trigger point in option 1?
Well, there is a trigger point in option 1. That's I think, it's just more subtle, and that is that the trigger point in option 1 for a review of the report and the analysis is when you have more dwelling units that receive entitlements. And as the mayor just indicated, if you had a DRI that was approved by the city council under the proposed revised fee, option 1, once that was approved and the entitlements were received, that would merit, not automatically as the city manager indicated, but would merit a review of this fee, this $1,013. That is different than alternatives 1 and 2, which are options 2 and 3, because their triggers are not entitlements, but actual work being done to begin the construction of the infrastructure in the homes where people are going to start buying, living in the homes and needing these recreational facilities.
Well, why wouldn't the same language be used for all 3 of these options?
It applies to all units, that's why.
Because option 1, the trigger is as soon as you adopt the ordinance. In other words, all the DRIs are included as soon as you adopt the resolution, excuse me. So you don't need a trigger because they're already included.
They're already entitled.
On option 2 and 3, which is alternative 1 and 2, they're not all included. Therefore, we need to have something that says when they will be included.
And conversely, if there were to become a DRI number 5,
then we would open the discussion back up and have
Okay.
to do a new study.
I'm clear. Thank you.
No questions.
Mr. DiLorenzo?
No questions.
No questions. Other questions, other comments? Let's open the meeting to the public. Anyone from the public wish to be heard on agenda item number 9, which is the actual resolution adopting one of those 3 alternatives?
Good morning, Council. My name's Eric Phillips, and I'm here representing the Flagler County Home Builders Association. Just want to say that I do appreciate that you took this back up to look at some additional alternatives. Obviously, we hope that you adopt one of the alternatives because lowering the impact fees that the homeowners that build the houses have to pay will, even though it doesn't seem like a ton of money going from the proposed fee to one of the alternatives, when you add these up over the 500 homes that we built last year, it really is a lot bigger number than you think. And with this county still being the second highest in the state, I believe, in unemployment, and our industry, the construction industry and real estate still being the largest industry in this county, I think, that as far as helping out with jobs and things like that and sparking that entrepreneurial spirit to go out and build, that removing just this one little obstacle, lowering this fee, will help. And since we pulled roughly 500 permits in new homes last year, that we're halfway, just keep in mind, 1,000 homes will generate $109 million in local revenue to the county. So that's a lot of money coming in to be getting taxes and things like that and other ways that would cover some of these things about having to recover the money from taxpayers. So that's it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Next speaker. Next speaker. Seeing no one approach the podium, we'll close the public portion of the meeting, come back to council. Council, we have 3 alternatives to choose from. Mr. Lewis.
Just a comment on what was said just a moment ago. That's true. You know, you're lowering, by using the alternatives, you're lowering the current impact on home buyers today. But one of the things we've always prided ourselves since I've been in Palm Coast is the fact that we've kept taxes down. The amount of taxes that we have to recover, or the amount of impact fees we have to recover in the future, I think is really going to push the taxes through the roof with respect to future taxes. And those taxes are going to be hitting current homeowners and new homeowners. And so I think taxes is really a consideration we have to make in terms of looking at alternative 1 and alternative 2. If that doesn't bother you, that's fine. But I think I prefer the proposed revised fee.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. DiLorenzo.
Mr. Lewis, that's a very, to me, that's a very hard way of thinking of this, because conversely, you could say this is $130 million worth of new facilities that will need to be maintained, and we're going to have to raise taxes to do that. You know, just thinking of the taxes from one point of view, that, okay, we may need other funds to reach the $130 million. Well, this is a big plan that are going to have to, you know, facilities that are going to need to be staffed and maintained. I mean, there's a lot of other costs that you're not seeing from this. This is just the cost to build the facilities. So I would say that that's the other side of the tax part there. And then you're going to have all these new residents. Of course, you're only going to collect these with new residents. New residents will be here to offset the cost. $3.5 million over 10 years. It's minimal, I would say. I will tell you that I favor option number 3, which is alternative number 2. It was my proposal that we take all the DRIs out. I think staff has done a really good job of reviewing those, and putting Palm Coast Park in for sure makes sense. I mean, there's infrastructure in place already. I think I said at the workshop I was less confident in the State Road 100 DRI, but I think you've seen it on the future agenda at the Planning Council, so perhaps something is going to happen with there. But more importantly, that DRI is in the core of Palm Coast and not way out west on the other side of the train tracks. One concern I do have is in the implementing language. And I'll just, if I can, I'll just read the sentence of it. I think it'll be the easiest way to do it. This is on page 93 of our, at least on the iPad, it's on page 93, but it's it's section 3 of option 2, N3. It says the park impact fee formula used to calculate parks impact fees shall be reviewed when development activities commence within an approved DRI. My suggestion is that we would add the word residential. So it would be shall be reviewed when residential development activities commence, because commercial development does not pay this impact fee, only residential does. So if you were to start your DRI and perhaps because of the length of time or needing to get the job centers in place first, perhaps you were going to build the commercial portions first. That could still come years before any residential construction occurred. So I would say residential. I mean, if that means they're laying roads for the whole thing, but only commercial development's going to occur first, well then fine. Roads are part of the residential development. But if they're going to break it into phases and the first phase is going to be commercial and commercial only, then that's why I think it's important to add the word residential in there.
Respectfully, I would disagree. When we look at the history of DRIs, the first thing that developers build is residences. They're quick and easy to build, quick and easy to sell. We had quite a discussion with those two Western DRIs where we talked about phasing, such that the developer could not build all the houses at once and then come back later and do the non-residential. The rationale in Alternative 1 and Alternative 2 has to do with when you've started infrastructure. And as you say, Mr. DiLorenzo, you put a road in. I don't know if that's for residents, I don't know if that's for commercial, industrial, or retail, but I know you've started construction. So I don't see adding the word residential really, practically speaking, I don't think it makes much of a difference.
Okay.
Just my opinion.
Yeah.
Okay, we have three alternatives. Mr. Lewis has expressed, I believe, a preference for the proposed revised fee. Mr. DiLorenzo has expressed a preference for Alternative 2. We can poll council. The other council members can express their preferences, or you can simply make a motion to approve one or the other and see how it flies.
Well, I would like to make a motion to approve agenda item number 9, a resolution approving the fee schedule for park impact fees and associated administrative charges using option number 3.
Which, for clarification, is Alternative 2 on your
Alternative 2,
screen.
option 3. It's the $849.24 one.
Yes.
We have a motion. Is there a second? Is there a second? Hearing no-
I don't know what a second means, but I'd be willing to go with that alternative. I'm not in favor of Alternative 1, but I would be willing to go in terms of Alternative 2.
Well, if you offer a second, it means that we will then vote on.
Okay, I'll make a second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for Alternative 2, option 3, however you want to describe it. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Nay.
No.
Roll call vote, please, for the
Vice
record.
Mayor DiLorenzo?
Yes?
Councilmember Ferguson?
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis?
No.
Councilmember McGuire?
No.
Mayor Netz?
No.
Mayor, this motion fails.
Okay, now we're down to 2.
I propose that we adopt proposed revised fee accordingly, and that's option 1.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor of option 1? Wait a minute.
That's correct.
Stop for 1 second. Clarification. The first vote we took was on the $849 fee. Is that correct?
That's option 3.
That was option 3. I voted in the affirmative. I'm going to offer a motion to reconsider.
You voted.
Because, in fact, Alternative 2, option 3 is the middle ground of the 3.
Right.
And so As someone who voted in the affirmative, I'm going to offer a motion to reconsider.
You voted in the negative.
Pardon?
I thought you.
No, you have to be in the affirmative for a motion. Mr. Reichman?
You have
Parliamentarian?
to reconsider, you have to have voted in the affirmative on a motion that failed. Mr. Mayor, I'll check with the city clerk. It was my memory that this vote on alternative 2 failed 2-3, and the yeas were.
That's right. I did vote against it. Okay. So my motion to reconsider is not valid. Okay, so now we're down to alternative 1, or revised fee.
Mr. Mayor, can you, for a little parliamentary help?
Okay.
On the losing side, the losing side may not ask for reconsideration. Is that correct?
That's correct. Let's clarify. If you're on the prevailing side of the motion, in this case, that's why it's confusing. If you're on the prevailing side of the motion, Mr. Mayor, you are correct. I apologize. You are correct. If you're on the prevailing side of the vote, you can move to reconsider. You were on the prevailing side of the vote. Okay? The motion failed, but you were on the prevailing side of the vote. So the 3 council members on the furthest to my left would have the option to move to reconsider. I'm sorry for any confusion that may have created.
I thought I was right. And again, to explain why I'm offering a motion to reconsider, alternative 2, the 849, is the middle ground between the other 2. I'm a firm believer in compromise.
I am too, Your Honor, but all 3 of these are less than what we're charging now.
That is correct. Yes.
I would just, Mr. McGuire, the current fee is not defensible, so it really has no bearing on the new fee, and we're setting out a $130 million plan.
Mr. Mayor, have you made your motion to reconsider?
Yes.
Has it received a second?
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, now we can discuss the motion to reconsider. Remember now, if you approve
Is a motion to reconsider debatable? Dig out your Robert's rules. I mean, let's face it, Robert's rules often gets in the way of common sense, but I want to be sure we're...
Hang on a second.
I've forgotten my hierarchy here.
What we're debating here is $160 per unit dwelling.
Yes.
Over 500 last year, which we were encouraged, and maybe be bigger this year.
Yes, it may be debated.
Okay, thank you. All right. So again, the motion to reconsider, which has been made and seconded, is because, in retrospect, I prefer alternative 2, which is the middle ground of the 3 phase.
I'd like to ask Mr. Reisman to make sure that since he's looking at Robert rules, that the affirmative has the right to reconsider as opposed to the negative.
That I'm sure of. Yes. I've had this come up, unfortunately, enough times that I've got this drilled in my memory. Even if the motion failed, if you're on the prevailing side of causing that motion to fail, you can move to reconsider. If you're on the losing side, then you can't keep bringing it up and bringing it up and bringing it up.
The reason I want to reconsider is because I erred in my vote. I was thinking along the 784 number, which I thought was the one that Mr. DiLorenzo was going to propose, promote, support, what have you.
So you're not conducting a filibuster?
No. There's a motion to reconsider. Let's, all in favor of the motion to reconsider, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Roll call vote on the motion to reconsider, just so we have it for the record.
Vice Mayor DiLorenzo.
Yes.
Councilmember Ferguson.
Aye.
Councilmember Lewis.
No.
Councilmember McGuire.
No.
Mayor Netz.
Yes.
Mayor, this motion passes 3-2.
Okay.
Now, let's be clear. That doesn't mean you've approved alternative number 2. It just means you're starting over.
We're starting over, in essence. Mr. DiLorenzo, your motion, please.
Motion to approve agenda item number 9, a resolution approving the fee schedule for park impact fees and associated administrative charges, option number 3, also known as alternative number 2, $849.24.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call vote.
Vice Mayor DiLorenzo?
Yes.
Councilmember Ferguson?
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis?
No.
Councilmember McGuire?
No.
Mayor Nets?
Yes.
Mayor, this motion passes 3-2.
Thank you very much. Took us a while to get there, but there we are.
And just to make sure of everyone's acceptable of the procedure, I want to read from Robert's Rules. As far as a motion to reconsider, this motion can be made only by one who voted on the prevailing side and made only on the same day of the original vote that was taken. Just want to make sure, for sure.
Same side, same day.
Same side, same day. Right.
Doesn't even have to happen at the same time, right? You could do it sometime during the meeting.
Yes.
Thank you.
It's been a while since I've looked at a good old Robert. Okay. At this time, I would like a motion to recess the city council meeting and to convene a CRA board meeting.
Move approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor of recessing council meeting, convening city CRA board, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are now seating as the State Road 100 CRA board. And that brings us to agenda item number 10.
Mayor, City Council, this is, well, I guess, board members, I should say, if I do this correctly.
Yep.
This is the refinancing of the interfund loan. You've have authorized us to move forward with this in formal action back in November, I believe it was, and these are the final results of the negotiations with the banks who showed interest. I'll let Chris take it from here.
Thank you, Mr. Landon. Good morning, Mayor and Council.
Nope, CRA board.
I'm sorry, CRA Board Director and folks. That's okay. Mark Alvin's here with me today, the city's financial advisor from First Southwest, to answer any questions. Also here today is Chris Rowe, Ken Arton's associate from Bryant, Miller and Olive, who pulled together all the legal stuff related to this particular item. And I'm just going to ask Mark to go ahead and give a brief overview of what we're looking at today.
Okay, for the can you hear me? Do I need to get up there? Or I'm sorry.
There you go.
There you go. For the record, it's Mark Galvin, First Southwest Company. As we talked about previously at the workshop, we went out for proposals. We talked to 3 different banks to find their interest in seeing whether or not they were interested in working with the city to be able to refinance the outstanding loan. We received 3 proposals, one from BB&T, one from Wells Fargo, and of course one from Prosperity, which is now officially, I guess, Emeritus.
Emeritus, yeah, Emeritus.
And our recommendation for this proposal, as we talked about before, was to go with the Prosperity Emeritus Bank. What they do is that they provided an interest rate of 4.4%. It's a 15-year loan. The interest rate is locked in for 10 years with an interest rate reset of 5-year Treasury plus 225 basis points. They do have a floor, and that the interest rate is 3.25%. That's in the year 11 through 15. The documents allow for the ability to prepay at any time with any funds, except for unless you refinance it, and then they would have a 1% call premium. At the end of 10 years, if it turns out that there is a better deal out there as far as than the index is being proposed, we have the ability to be able to refinance that. What we have before you is the last, as we call it, the last step or the last approval process. There's a resolution that will go ahead and authorize the refinancing of the debt, and that will then allow us to move forward and transfer funds and to provide the city and to reimburse the city's reserve or account for the $5.8 million. Any questions?
Council questions? Board questions, sorry. Anyone from the public wish to be heard on agenda item number 10?
I got one quick.
Mr. Lewis, please.
Just one quick question, just a matter of clarification on on Exhibit A, and you perhaps don't even have to refer to it. It says to order of prosperity, that's scratched out, and it says Ameris Bank.
Yes.
Could you explain that? I don't.
I understand that they officially changed their name in December to American Space. As far as the impact to the city, it really doesn't mean their money is good whether or not it's Americus or Prosperity. It's just a
Whether they're
name change.
prosperous or not.
That's right.
I didn't know about the name change, that's why I'm...
Yes.
Yeah, that was, you know.
Same
through-
bank, different name.
Same bank. Through this process, they let us know that there was going to be a name change. It was just a matter of timing.
Okay, no problem.
They were bought out by a larger bank.
We had public comment. Nobody appeared. Back to council. Additional question, back to board. Additional questions, comments, or a motion on agenda item number 10.
I think I asked this question at the workshop, but refresh my memory as to the principal balance at the end of this amortization schedule.
The principal payments each year will be around $200,000 on average during a 10-year period. So it'll be $2 million of principal paid off, and then the balance of the principal over the final 5 years, if we don't pay it off sooner, based on available funds.
So roughly 3.8 after 10 years.
Right.
Thanks.
Move approval of agenda item number 10, a resolution for the State Road 100 Corridor Community Redevelopment Agency approving the refinancing of the interfund loans from the City General Fund to the State Road 100 CRA.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries without objection. Agenda item number 11, State Road 100 Community Redevelopment Agency resolution approving expenses related to the Bulldog Drive Improvement Project. Mr. Landon?
This is unrelated to the refinancing. This is a project that been in planning for some time. City Council awarded the contract at your last business meeting, but because we are using CRA funds, now that you're sitting as the CRA board, you're required to authorize the expenditures to come out of the CRA budget. It is fully budgeted, and we have the money in the bank at this time.
That is correct. The full project funds are in the bank.
Council questions?
So moved that we...
Let's let the public speak first. Anyone from the public wish to speak on agenda item number 11?
Public.
No one from the public approach the podium. Back to council. Mr. Lewis, you have a motion?
Yes, moved that we adopt resolution approving the expenses related to the Bulldog Drive Improvement Project.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries without objection. Is there a motion to adjourn the CRA board meeting and reconvene the city council meeting?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are now back as city council. I can address you as council members. And this brings us to agenda item number 12. It has a familiar look. Mr. Landon, you want to comment on it?
Yeah, this is the city council resolution authorizing the refinancing. Now that the CRA board has approved the refinancing, city council also has to authorize it. And so there's nothing new regarding this. It's just a formality. It's all the attorney's fault. Legal formality you must follow.
Kick him when he's not there to defend himself.
Absolutely. Anyone from the public who should be heard on agenda item number 12? Seeing no one approach the podium, back to council. Is there a motion?
So moved. Move to approve.
Second. Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries without objection. This brings us to the consent agenda, items 13 through 20. Would anybody wish to remove anything from the consent agenda? If anyone from the public wishes to speak on these consent agenda items before we potentially remove some, this is your opportunity. Anyone from the public wish to speak on any of the items identified on the consent agenda? Seeing no one approaching the podium, go back to council. Do you wish to remove anything, anybody?
No, sir.
Nobody seems to be screaming and yelling. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries without objection. This brings us to the public participation portion of the meeting. This is the opportunity for the public to speak on any item that was not on the agenda. It could be items related to our workshop. It could be relating to anything your little heart desires. Anyone from the public wish to be heard?
That's you, Louis. You're the only public here.
Louis McCarthy, Palm Coast. No, I only have one thing, and I inquired about it, is about the city, about the website not having the city meeting calendar. That particular thing is not on the website for this year, since they revised it. And I say that only because I print out the whole year's schedule. And my wife reminds me, it's on the refrigerator. And right now, that spot is blank. And she says, well, pull it down. But I can't pull it down. And like I know Jack prints it out because he's always calling up about that. So if you could officially look into it, thank you.
Mr. Landon, can we be sure that there's some refrigerator decoration?
Yes, it is on the website. I mean, I'm looking at it right now. So Cindy can help you find it. It has a little different look, but it is still there. So it would just be a matter of, it's under community calendar, and then you can do event calendar, sports calendar, or city meetings. So if you just want city meetings, you click on that one, you get that. So it's there, but we can help.
Okay. Anyone else from the public wish to be heard? Seeing no one approach the podium, we close the public participation portion of the meeting. Discussion by City Council of matters not on the agenda. Mr. McGuire, why don't we start with you?
Mr. Landon, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, how are we coming along with a contract with the sheriff?
The new contract is scheduled for next workshop.
Good.
I haven't gotten back their last, they had one other revision they requested. Virginia, have you seen?
Mr. Noel said he'd be getting it to me sometime this week.
Okay, so hopefully if we get it back in time, it will be on your next agenda. If not, it'll be 2 weeks.
Anything else, sir?
No, sir.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes, I just want to go back to a happening, I guess, a little while back, with respect to Palm Coast Parkway West. You know, we've been talking about this for a long, long time, at least I have. And one day I was driving home, and there were some men digging in the ground at Pine Lakes Parkway and Palm Coast Parkway. And since that time, there has been a tremendous change in that area, to the point that people have approached me in Publix, Walmart, and other places and say, gee, that area sure looks better. What happened? Well, they finally caught up to themselves. And so a shout out to Tony, Bill Butler, and all the people on that crew to a job well done.
It does look good.
Yeah.
It sure does.
Mr. DiLorenzo?
Nothing specific, nothing.
Mr. Ferguson?
Nothing to offer.
I have nothing. Discussion by city attorney of matters not on the agenda.
Last week, I mentioned a couple things that were going on up in Tallahassee, so I'm going to move further north, and specifically up in Washington, just to let you all know that fortunately there's nothing that I can tell from the pending cases that are before the United States Supreme Court that could directly affect the city of Palm Coast. There are several cases dealing with First Amendment, specifically legislative prayer. There's a case that they're going to rule on. Doesn't really affect us, obviously. There's a couple cases dealing with the Clean Air Act and the EPA rulemaking and authority. It's talking about types of establishments that we don't have in Palm Coast. There's a anti-abortion protesters First Amendment buffer zone case, and another case on Fourth Amendment searches, and then lastly there's a case dealing with the application of the Fair Housing Act. So with all of the fright that I mentioned, or hopefully did not create last Tuesday. I just want to make sure that we have less to worry about up in Washington, at least from the Supreme Court. I make no promises as to the Congress. That's my report.
Thank you very much. Discussion by city manager of items not on the agenda.
Yeah, first of all, I am required to let you know that I approved an expenditure for hauling our sewer sludge away last week, above and beyond what we normally would do. Our normal hauler, I'm going to try to get this right, Richard, but you can fill in the blanks. The person that normally hauls away our sludge, that's the final solid product coming out of our sewer plant after we've tried to dry it as much as possible, and they have to haul it to a specific site under certain conditions, and they have to mix it with ash, fly ash. And Richard's getting a kick out of this, but I'm going to keep going here. And the hauler supplier who supplies the fly ash said, we're done, we don't have any. So he calls and said, I can't legally haul it because I don't have the right stuff to mix with it. So we had to go find an alternative to haul our sewer sludge. And the price is slightly higher, but this would be on a temporary basis. We authorized a purchase order of $40,000, so that's above my signature authority. Our purchasing department division will be going out to bid, and then we will have an actual go through a bidding process competitively. But unless you can figure out ways to stop people from flushing their toilets, waiting for that bid process to occur, we still have to take care of the business.
Where do you haul it to, Mr. Landon?
I knew that's why Richard is here.
Obviously, this is a regulated disposal of the byproduct from the wastewater plant. The current process, as Mr. Landon said, the vendor hauls it from our wastewater plant down to an area located at the Volusia County landfill. That's where they treat it with the fly ash, and they produce a fertilizer. They lost their fly ash supplier, so we've arranged for this other outfit called Sweetwater that will haul it actually to their treatment facility in Ocala.
Do we anticipate a resurrection of the fly ash, or is that going for good?
There's a couple of things that come into play relative to that. They also have other issues with their treatment facility in Volusia County. They've lost their lease on the Volusia County landfill. So when that expires, they were going to have to relocate anyway. They're in the process of doing that. In fact, they're even looking at sites in Flagler County for their treatment facility. So they may very well be a viable alternative in the future, but it won't be mixing with fly ash. They have a different treatment process.
Richard, is this at all related to that potential BCR option as well?
Well, BCR is a company that manufactures equipment and has a process for treating wastewater biosolids. It's one of the alternative processes. There's many alternative processes. We are looking at BCR as a potential long-range alternative. Our engineers are doing a study to determine whether that is financially feasible for us to use as an alternative treatment process. So far, the preliminary report looks like it would cost more.
The process is I have to report it to you publicly, and then I think we probably have to do a written report that Richard will put together. Just found this out late last week. I think it was Friday I authorized a PO. So it doesn't require your approval, but does require the public notice because I took the emergency action to make sure our wastewater plant continues in operation. The impact on the budget will be minimal at this point, depending on what the bids come in later on. But this action here is not a major difference from what we're paying for right now. Also, we have our professional tennis tournament in town this week and next week. So if you get out there and want to watch some tennis, We have our, next weekend would be our adult flag football league coming to town. This one was a huge success based on their experience at Indian Trail Sports Complex last year. We were, I think, last on their schedule because we were new. This year we're new on their, first on their schedule. And if you want to be considered as part of the season and all that, you have to be at the first tournament. So we should have a good crowd of young adults playing flag football. Some of them actually, I think, played NFL.
If you want to go out and see your Representative Travis Hudson beaten to a pulp, that's where he'll be.
Okay, yes.
He plays flag football.
Yes. Lastly, the Palm Coast Historical Society is having their open house at their new facility at Holland Park. I know city council members all been invited. Stop by. I saw Mr. Ferguson there before the meeting, but if you can stop by and say hello, they want to show council members their new facility there that was approved by you all, that they can move into those portable units there in Holland Park. They've done a nice job. Mayor, that's all I have for today.
Mr. Vice Mayor?
Move we adjourn.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
You didn't